Hey guys, I'm going to do a quick, maybe a 5 or so minutes. I'll just kind of go through the modules and give you an idea of some of the things that I might want to review. So let me just wipe off the board here. So this is micro. Again, micro being the individual, right? So we're talking about choices of individuals. And in the last couple chapters, we got into individual firms. So number one rule of, well, especially microeconomics, but really economics as a whole. In fact, I had a professor that used to say, if you never learn anything, learn this in this class, and that is profit is maximized when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So if you remember those curves, generally the marginal cost, marginal revenue curve looks something like that. So as long as marginal cost is lower than marginal revenue, you can still make profit by earning one more. So in micro, we think on the margins. Should I make one more unit? Should I drink one more can of Coke? Should I have one more piece of pizza? What is it going to benefit me? Okay. So some of the basic ideas have like spontaneous order or invisible hand. That is, invisible hand is that it's kind of this idea that there's this invisible hand guiding individuals within the market that as they make their own decisions based on their own self-interest, that in doing so, they help society as a whole. So when, I'm up here outside Seattle, so, did Howard Schultz start Starbucks so that he could serve the masses? And most of us probably like Starbucks coffee. I like the coffee, maybe not him, but, some of us do, some don't, whatever. But I do like the coffee. So what he did is he wanted to form a business in his own self-interest. He wanted to grow this business. He made a lot of money. In fact, How I Built This NPR podcast had an interview with him that they just put out last week. It's very interesting. It talks about how he went through the process of starting at zero and building up to the biggest coffee company in the world, probably. Okay. And why he did it. He didn't do it so he could, I'm going to serve my fellow man. No, I want to make money, and in making money, I serve my fellow man. He creates jobs. I worked there for quite a while when I was young, when I was your age. So, all right. So week one, we had a lot of that kind of introductory material. We had, again, the invisible hand, the importance of property rights, scarcity and opportunity costs. When you make a decision, think in terms of not sunk costs, but opportunity costs. Sunk costs, unrecoverable. Opportunity cost is what am I going to give up in the future, if I decide X instead of Y? What is economics? Human action, right? We're just talking about human behavior here. How do people act? In micro, we throw math in there, and it's kind of what they do, but not my personal preference. I'm an Austrian. And so there's the division of labor. Econ Pop Castaway talked about that. iPencil, incredible, right? Great stuff. So incentives, week two, we talked about that you need property rights. You need the fundamental idea that individuals own what they own, that they have the right to do with it what they want, and that if I invest something, that whatever comes out of it is also mine. So it's not, if it was all risk, nobody would do anything. If it was all reward, everybody would do it, and it wouldn't. It's impossible. So it's a risk-reward relationship. But if there's no reward, nobody does anything. So that's why property rights are so important. If I invest, I invest in some governor likes the business that I create, he just comes and takes it away, right? Because I don't have any property right. I don't have any right to it, right of it. So that's the basic incentives. People do things because they have an incentive to do so. We require incentives. That's why the market system works great, is that it incentivizes people through their own self-interest to go out, invest, grow the economy. Learn liberty, talked about that. So then we get into supply and demand, demand curve, supply curve, and when we eventually take that and we turn it into elasticity, right? So it talks about, we talked about price controls in there, all kinds of applications. prices, what's the importance of prices? Well, prices give information on relative scarcity, and most important, they drive goods to their most efficient or their most valued use, right? So if you have a 15-passenger van and you have a bunch of people that want it, one person just wants to drive around and consume gas in it, he's probably not going to pay very much for it. He doesn't really have a high demand. Another person's got 2 kids, he doesn't need 15-passenger van, but maybe he wants it. He wants the room, but he's not willing to pay. None of these people are willing to pay what the guy with 13 kids, right? Him and his wife want to drive around their 13 kids. They need that van, and they're willing to pay more than most other people, right? So they get the van. I can talk about gold. I would like to wire my house with gold. Boy, a very efficient way to conduct electricity, but maybe not because the price is so high. People would like to do other things with gold. Then we get into elasticity, right? So you've got the cross-price elasticity. Calculating the elasticity of demand, right? It's a relative change in the quantity demand or the amount demanded divided by the relative change in price, right? Percentage. So again, we don't do absolutes because if the price drops by $1,000, what does that do to demand? Well, it depends on what the item is. If the item is a used car, that's probably going to have a pretty big impact. But if the item is a house in San Francisco, nobody even bats an eye at $1,000, right? So it's relative change. Elasticity, tax elasticity, and that's kind of a market thing. So as taxes go down, what is the relative change in people's behavior there? And we're going to talk about minimum wage later on, so I don't think I asked anything about that in here. But cross-price elasticity, and you've also got one good. If the demand of one good goes up when the price of another goes up, if they go in the same, if let's say good X and Y, if the price of good X goes up and the demand of good Y goes up, they must be substitutes, right? So I look at Ruffles and what's a good shoes or I don't know. I'm trying to think through my cabinet, right? So the price of Almond Breeze and Silk. These are competitors in the cashew almond milk market. I don't really care that much which one. I'm not a brand loyalist. But if I see the price of one goes down, I'm going to buy more of that, right? So what that means is the price of the other has sort of, in a way, relatively gone up, right? So if the price of silk goes up and ceteris paribus, everything else constant, the price of Almond Breeze stays the same, price of silk goes up, I'm going to shift my demand from silk over to Almond Breeze. I'm going to consume more of that product. They're substitutes. They're imperfect substitutes, but they're almost the same thing. I put it in my coffee and my Starbucks coffee and stuff, so I don't really care which one, right? Now, if the price of one goes up and the demand for the other goes down, that's complements, because if the price of one goes up, I consume less of that good. Therefore, anything that I consume in conjunction with that good, I'm going to consume less of as well, right? So hamburgers and ketchup, right? A condiment is a complement, right? Okay, so how about utility? We've got Homer. So Homer is inhuman. He never exhibits diminishing marginal utility, right? We know that everybody exhibits diminishing marginal utility. So if you consume one soda for $1.50, are you going to pay $1.50 for another soda? Probably not at the exact same time, right? But if I gave you, I'll sell it to you for $1, you might say, okay, well maybe I'll consume it. So diminishing marginal utility. Some good examples in Homer economics there. Behavioral. So look through that and subjective value. People value things subjectively. Like I said, I like Starbucks coffee. I don't really like other coffees. Maybe I'm just completely used to it, but subjectively, I think it's the best. Other people think it's terrible. Hey, there is nothing more subjective than taste. Right? Levitt on prostitution and marginal utility. Funny thing there. If you're indifferent between I guess she was indifferent between selling her services, then what he said is she should raise the price. Kind of, there's indifference curves. And economic utility, there I just talked about that. That's a good, go watch that clip. It's on YouTube as well. Maybe it'll be right next to this one, I don't know. And then we get into cost production, economic rent. What is economic rent? Well, it's the idea of, I'm not going, if I have a resource here, maybe I don't want to sell it, but if the price goes up, then I will say, oh, you know what, the price is high enough, I'm going to sell my house or my car or whatever, right? So it's the price. The idea there is to bring things that otherwise would not be on the market to the market, right? Marginal revenue gives marginal cost. Okay. So we always maximize. We always analyze on the margins. Okay. So let me open up the midterm here from before, the old one. Okay, utility and economic behavior, right? Let me see, you answer a couple of these. You should consume more of something when its marginal benefit is greater than its marginal cost, right? So marginal cost continues to decline until they're equal, and then you stop. So you continue to pound, you know, if you're at a party, I don't drink, so I don't know anything about this, but if you're at a party, you can pound beers until the benefit that you get, which is people looking at you, I guess, I don't really know, but until the benefit you get from said beers is no longer good. Sorry, I'm looking around. Profits encourage entry into purely, well, okay, so we don't get into that yet. So again, some of these things, don't look at them quite yet. But in the long run, firms encounter falling average total cost. This is economies of scale. And 500 bottles of perfume, and the price is 5. So here you're looking, again, relative change in demand, right? Which is, it goes from 5 down to 300, so that's 200 over 500, so 0.4 divided by a change in the price, which is 0.5, right? Or 1, right? So 0.4 over it goes from $5 to $10, so it increases of a full 100%, okay? So what is that? In my head, I believe that's 0.4, and that would be inelastic, right? So you see a smaller relative change in the demand than you do in the price. That's relatively inelastic, right? So it's somewhat of a steeper curve. And so that's the basic idea there. Looking at some of these other ones, you've got Coke here again. His first is 35, his second is 50, and so he's getting diminishing marginal utility, right? So his marginal utility from 0 to 1 is 35, and the next is 15, and then going from 50 to 60 is 10, right? Okay, firms produce, and I'm trying to find some other good ones. Nope, purely competitive, that's for next test. I say in class, obviously there is no class, but I did have a class. I will be in class in a couple weeks, and I was at the beginning. But prosperity and economic growth come from, well, that's not really you guys either, but it's from production supply. Fill in chart, answer the following questions. So again, total revenue is what? It's the number of acres times how much that acre yields. The marginal revenue is the difference. Right, so here going from 10,000, 9,000, 8,000. So your marginal revenue is constant. It's 1,000, right? Or sorry, your change in revenue per acre. So let's see, 1,000, 9,000. Yeah, sorry, I'm not even looking at this very closely. That acre's revenue. So your total revenue is going to be what? You get 10,000, 1,000 times 1. What am I even thinking of that acres yield? So looking up here, $10 a bushel, right? Times 1,000 bushels is $10,000, and you're getting a constant. So actually, this is kind of a, well, what you can see is here, acres yield is diminishing marginal returns, right, per acre. And if I'm looking at total revenue here, each acre is, the first one's 10,000. Now I'm getting 9,000 per acre. It's 18, so 10 to 18, and then 24, right? So I'm doing that acre's revenue times, or 10,000 plus 9,000 plus 8,000. So marginal revenue was 7. Because this is not, sorry, I'm totally not paying attention very much here. That acre's revenue, right? So we're talking about the third acre gives you 8,000. The fourth acre brings in a marginal revenue of 7,000, not each acre. So what you're getting is total revenue would be 10, 19, 27, 34. So your marginal revenue would be the difference in those. I don't know if I did the way people, I forget what the short answer was going to be, but remember the 4 ways people spend money? That was a Milton Friedman. I spend my own money on myself. I want to get a maximum value. I care about utility. My money on you, your other people, other people's money on me, other people's money on other people. Right. This is of love. So sunk cost versus opportunity cost. Should a business stay in business in the short run? It depends, right? So if a business is losing money, well, can it cover its fixed cost or its variable costs, right? So if I'm going to stay in business and being in business is a lower loss than not being in business, that is, if I'm a restaurant and I can pay my variable costs and eat into my fixed cost a little bit, I should stay in business, right? So you can kind of look more into that if you like. I don't think that was on there. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask me via email. Because, let's see, is there anything else on there I want to go over? No, I think that's pretty good. You know, I would say the idea of the supply and demand with the rhino, I think I either posted or will post. So I did post, I think, something about the fish and Whole Foods. So if you incentivize people that they can make money off producing an item, an animal, you know, cows would not exist if people did not eat cows. Okay, they would just let them go and they'd all die in the wilderness. So with the rhinos, it actually has been done before. It was 10 years apparently in Sussel talked about it, but you had farms and people were able to farm them. They'd get them to maturity, they put them to sleep, they cut the horn off. A poacher shoots it dead, cuts the horn off, right? It's $250,000 for one of these horns. It's a big incentive to break the law, and they risk their life doing it. So it doesn't do anything. But maybe if we can incentivize, you know, producing more of these animals, and also, you know, there's other things that could come, right? Bringing ivory that exists to the market. All of this could drive the price down and disincentivize poaching. So, well, it is a terrible thing. And we're not talking about legalized hunting, right? None of that. So people confuse the two, but that's not the case. So anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I didn't want to go too long. I'm going to put this up on YouTube, so good luck, guys. I hope you enjoyed the door there. Take care.